Hello and welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. So today I'm so excited to have my friend and somebody I really admire, Elena Lipson, on with us today. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you. I admire you too, and I
Oh,
wish we lived just a little bit closer.
I
We live
know.
far enough away where it's hard to get together. But yes,
Yes.
I'm so happy to be on your podcast, and congratulations.
Thank you. Well, it's so good to see you. For those listening, you'll hear Elena, but I will also be publishing the video interview series on my YouTube channel. So Elena and my story, we go back a few years. Elena was one of my early clients when I actually launched the Legal Website Warrior. And she is a fellow entrepreneur in the online space. She does amazing work. And the fun story was actually about how we met. I had a workshop, like a weekend retreat that I signed up for. And Elena and I ended up being like, what do we call ourselves? Bed buddies, roommates? I know.
It was this funny moment where you go on retreat, and I hadn't done any local retreats in a while. I had hosted retreats, and it was so interesting because you sort of go thinking you'll have your own bed in your own room. So okay, we're going to share the room, but then we have to share a bed too, which I was so thankful it was you, because we just had the best time laughing. And I think it was more of like a personal us retreat weekend. Besides the yoga and other stuff, we really value our walks together and chatting and getting
Yes.
to know you. It was really fun. I'm glad I had that little bit of an intuitive nudge to say, why don't you go find a retreat locally? And then it was just perfect timing. So
Oh my gosh, it was
yeah.
so fun. I know. So I remember obviously so much about getting to know you, our mutual friend Gina, who led the retreat, and that's about it, honestly. Like
Right.
I
Like I remember being in bed together and talking and laughing. I remember walking a
totally
lot.
being like,
That's
we
about
should
it.
go to
Yeah.
sleep now. I know. So it was really fun, but that was definitely like, there are times that I go to an event and I'm really clear, like, oh, I was here to meet a specific person, right? And for that event, it was you. So that was super fun. But for those of you listening, let's get to know Elena a little better. She is the founder of the Divine Self-Care Circle membership and the top rated Meditations and Musings podcast. Congratulations on that, Elena. As a retreat leader, speaker, writer, inner self-care coach, and podcaster, Elena loves to work with busy women and inspire them to drop the false agreements and redefine the hustle in exchange for creating a life they love with her feminine metrics of success: pleasure, play, ease, grace, and trusting your own pace. Through her speaking, writing, retreats, and online programs, Elena wants to help busy women drop the hurry mindset and become the number one asset in life, business, and the bedroom. Elena has lived in Russia, New York City, California, and today happily enjoys the green trees and fresh air of the Pacific Northwest with her husband and son. So she has created the Divine Self-Care Circle, 66 sacred rituals. That's a tongue twister. The Meditations and Musing podcast. And you can find her writing in Tiny Buddha, Huffington Post, Business Rocks Magazine, Business Heroine Magazine, and Coco Echo Magazine. You can find her online at elenalipson.com. Elena, welcome. I'm so happy to have you
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for that was a mouthful. I was like, that's a lot of stuff.
But I
I should
love it.
squeeze in 7 years of work into one
Right,
little
a couple
bio.
paragraphs. I know it's tough to do, but you really, I mean, I love what you teach on. I love your work. I mean, even our conversation right before we hit the record button, right, is like all about like, how do we get life to slow
Yeah.
down right now?
Yeah.
It's so, so relevant. And I'm sure for folks listening, especially women, can relate to being pulled in 89 directions and having childcare issues right now in current circumstances, and starting school here shortly if they haven't already, with children, if they've got children at home, if their kids have grown up or they maybe don't have children, they could be caretaking for others. There's so much that is happening. And on top of that, some of us are running businesses and are entrepreneurs. And So talk to me about what you're seeing. Are you like, how is your own work going right now? Are you feeling a big uptick in women's need to address this area in their life?
Huge. I think, it's fascinating as the whole quarantine and shutdown happened. My actual work life didn't really change that much because I
Mm,
transitioned to working for myself from home
yeah,
um,
years ago.
back years ago when my son was born. And this is like
Mm,
my third iteration of online business and working from home. And prior to the quarantine, even my son had been homeschooling for 3 years. So that
wow.
technically didn't change, right? And my husband works shifts and he's an essential worker. So he kept working. So, like, the structure and bones of our life didn't really change. But of course it changed, right? Because even thinking back to our conversation and how we met and being in person and how just fulfilling that is and having that, time to be with people, that just of course disappears. And the outside world is unstable. And so what I'm seeing a lot of is this having layers and layers and layers of letting go how things should
Mm,
be, layers of letting go how we can create in a time where everything feels frantic. And it's interesting because even if your household is not chaotic and it's not, it's relatively peaceful, meaning you have resources and you have work and you're sort of figuring it out, there's still this real external pressure happening to have to choose your politics, figure out how to help others, how to um, be awake and aware and informed. And under normal circumstances, I work with women to help them heal and soothe their nervous system, and so that they don't develop or heal from autoimmune and overwhelm and all the stuff that I normally deal with the women, right? So under normal circumstances, whatever normal was for you, your life is already overwhelming and can be overscheduled
mm,
and have, I help women release and reduce and delete things so that you can actually make space to get present, to hear yourself, to be in tune with your body wisdom. But now, even if you don't have an acute thing happening in your house, even if no one's sick, even if everything's fine, even if you have resources, and a lot of people don't, and a lot of people do, and everything in the middle, right? That your nervous
mm,
system has no where to go. It's constant
mm,
fight, flight, or freeze. It just is, because we know intellectually that there's a danger out there. We know intellectually that there are people suffering. We know intellectually that it's not business as usual. And so we have to figure out how to function within that. We have to, especially those of us who are committed to personal development, committed to inspiring others, committed to helping. It's such a natural part of our DNA. We really have to come to our own center and say, how are we going to show up now? And I've seen so many different reactions. I've seen, like, I'm completely done, I'm stepping back, no more social media, I don't even know what to do with my work.
mm,
Then other people who have felt more called to activism and are really getting out there and just really creating new ways of seeing, taking time to listen, taking time to self-educate. um, but I feel really strongly too that even if you're not like super head in the sand and you're not super activist, there's still a place for you. And there's still a
mm,
place to go deeper within your own work and see what your value is. So, and I think that really represents who I've been forever, whether I was working in technology or sales or training. My question was always, how can I be more myself in what I'm doing? How can I honor
mm.
the connection? How can I show up without my stuff on me, right? So I can, what I call false agreements, which is actually a book in progress. I'm so excited because
Woohoo!
it feels like a culmination of the work that I've been doing for a long time, and it's really about learning to remove yourself from what I call false agreements, living by other people's priorities, other people's opinions, other people's approval, other people's expectations, the people pleasing way that we have been taught and programmed and conditioned to be. So that
Mm,
now, when everything's up in the air, it shows you really quickly how much of your life has been programmed to live for others, to do what they think is right. And now more than ever, I feel like my mission is to remind people, especially women who I work with, to create that gap of time between seeing something and not being reactive, not blindly following, not just doing it because you're scared or not sure, but really coming back into your center and letting it go through your understanding of how you can show up and what is right for you. Because it's just, I mean, we can get into this whole political thing, and I'm we can go wherever we want to go, but what I'm seeing a lot right now is a lot of people who are off center and off of their own knowing. And so I feel like between my podcast and my membership and just my, the content I provide every day, that's really where I'm focused, and helping you remember that you do still get to have a voice. You do still get to have your intuitive knowing, more than you actually really need to tune into that, because you really can't. You can't serve. You can't be an activist without really understanding why you're even doing it, right? Because the second something goes wrong, the second there's too much pressure, you just crumble under it anyway, because you haven't created that foundational, deeply rooted knowing of why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, there's so much we could dig into there. For me personally, like my experience during this super intense time, right? And life was still kind of intense before that. I mean, I've got a little buddy who is 7, just turned 8. The last couple of weeks, my kiddos have turned 8 and 3, and they're, really busy and full. And I did have some built-in childcare several days a week for my daughter, but I work from home, right? There's a lot of juggling happening around here. And especially in the midst of COVID, it has just felt like crazy town most days, honestly. Like I laughed because there was a period where literally every day for it felt like months, I was like, if I don't massively foobar somebody else's schedule, like I feel like I haven't done my job today, that was just becoming the norm. And so a couple things that I've done, because things have felt out of control, I've been totally off balance at times where there's just more that needs to happen in a day than there is day to do all of those things. And for sure, all at the same time. Right. And so, for me, I started doing something the end of July, because my schedule had been pre-booked for months, but starting the end of July, I scheduled one untouchable day each week where nothing gets scheduled. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know. I haven't done this before. I read about it in a book. I'm doing it. And so that's provided a little cushion. But then the other thing that actually just started this week is I kicked off what I called the Leap Lab, which is just a personal passion project that came to me as an idea that, if I'm going to dig in and do the work, which I clearly need to do right now, having been in this period of being so off balance, then why don't I take some other women along for the journey who may need the same type of thing? But it's been really interesting, because even only for 2 days, getting up and having this space, which I haven't taken the luxury of giving myself this whole time, right? This whole time it's been this reactive, kids and meals and family and work and just cramming it all in. And it's like, I've totally been leaving myself out of that picture, which we all know does not make for a sustainable life. And yet, like, the activation power of putting, like, the activation energy it requires to put yourself back in the picture, that was a tough hurdle to get over. How do you help women recognize that they're at that point of needing really clearly to make a shift and doing what it takes to create that? I feel like there's so many ways we convince ourselves to just stay in the rat race or whatever, stay in the chaos, because it can just feel like so much. And particularly when you talk about these layers that are added on right now, the political stuff, all of the social unrest, there's so many ways that I want to be showing up that I feel like I just cannot fit them all in.
Yeah. One of my big goals is to have women have these structures in place before shit hits the fan.
Right. And this is what I was going to ask you. Does it have to be a practice? To me, I think the answer is it has to be a daily practice, because otherwise.
I think I've been doing this work for a long time, helping people change. And this is why I came up with the acronym, because I started exploring, like, who enters my circle and why. And I came up with this acronym called HOME. They come home. H is they're having some sort of health issue, usually autoimmune, I can raise my hand to that too, because that's how I started my journey. O is overwhelm from all the things going on in their life, all the yeses that they've taken on that no longer serve, but they're still there, creeping in all the time. M is motherhood, because motherhood, because it's all the spiritual journey, right, rolled into one. And then E is entrepreneurship, and I think taking that leap into self empowerment is a really spiritual journey in itself, if you allow it to be, right?
Yes.
And eventually, if you don't allow it to be, it still becomes that, because it's still one of the things that'll challenge you more than anything not more than anything, but it's one of the paths that really, it's a transformational path for sure, because you have to really dig in and discover all of your limits. And so coming home in one of those combinations, you hit a wall in one of those things, like things are going along just fine. And then maybe you decide, oh, well, now that I'm a mom, I want to work for myself because I want the freedom. And so you start taking on more and more, and then boom, your health is suffering. So like some combination of those things starts to happen. And one day you see me talking about self-care and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. You don't even know you needed it. So I think as a human being, we don't usually change unless we're going away from pain. Like something is wrong. Your relationship's suffering. You're tired of being constantly in lack. You want to change something. Your health is, unbearable, or something's off. Like a lot of women have this, like something's just off. And I think for women, I'm in my mid 40s now, but I think for a lot of women, somewhere around their 30s and 40s, and I'm not in my 50s yet, so I can't speak to it. I can only speak to where I am, right, and where I see. Though I do have women in their 50s in the group as well. There's these layers of awakening that happen where you have lived enough to be able to look back and say, what was I thinking when I did that? Who was I being? What part of me allowed me to betray myself like that, or to say yes when I meant no, or to say no when I really meant yes? Like you start to see the ways that you've been inauthentic and misaligned. And so yes, for sure. The short answer is yes, it's important to have a practice so that you are constantly aware. And we're also very human. So a lot of us won't change unless something is like, unless we're sitting on something sharp, we're not going to move, right? The seat's comfortable, it's torn, like you love it, it's comfy. You see a better chair over there, but it would just take too much energy to go there. But unless it's like something sharp sticking up, you won't go. So that's why when I thought about how to teach self-care, I have like, it started as a 12-week program. It expanded into a 6-month program. It moved into a year-long program. And now it's a membership ongoing. And I have had women in there from the very beginning who are still there and still, we do the same 12 core pillar topics every year. But when I started reverse engineering what really works and how do people start and what's most important is that tiny little daily anchor of practice is what helps you to start making those little shifts. And so the thing that I've been giving away for years and teaching at retreats, and the thing that actually women come back and they're like, this is the thing that actually changes everything. And when I don't do it, it actually changes everything for the negative. So that's why I teach my magic morning practice as the daily anchor for checking in with yourself, for being in your body, for connecting to spirit and something bigger than yourself, because we all wake up, especially now, with like that little oh shit moment, like, either what did I do? What do I have to do? What did I say yes to? Like there's those little thoughts that we wake up with. And when you have an anchor practice in place that you just build in as a habit, it allows you to have that check-in with yourself, and it becomes this core, unshakable, non-negotiable way to connect with you, to say like, what do I need today? Maybe today is a day where I need to put in some pockets of quiet, where I need to put in some play. I haven't laughed in a while. Like maybe I need to take my kids somewhere today to just have fun, or maybe I need to call a friend, or maybe I need to Voxer with some girlfriends and peers and have a conversation. Like you really have an ability to check in. So I think, like I said, the short answer is you can start any day. Like today is a great day to start. Tomorrow is a great day to start. But also, I think I do chat with some, peers, friends who are in the same sort of situation. And the word we've been using a lot lately is just giving ourselves grace,
Mm-hmm.
for not being able to function the same way we did 6 months ago or a year ago. One of the first things that I did intuitively, without really even thinking about it until I was about a week into it, I realized I was doing it, was I stopped setting the alarm in the morning, because
Mm,
I felt like I just wanted to wake up when my body woke me up instead of being pulled out. Like my nervous system was so stressed, not
yes.
stress. See, stress is not the right word, because we always have stress,
Mm.
but it's almost like it was so on high alert already
Yes. Overload. Yes.
that the alarm was like a little too much. Like I just didn't need to hear it. I still woke up around the same time, maybe give or take 30, 40 minutes. But it was just a different entry point into the day.
Mm,
And then it made me question things. It made me question what is most important. If I had one thing to accomplish today that I had energy for in this morning hour, that I have time for work, that I'm making time for work, what would it be? How do I then, because I do believe that, women in the home, set the tone. We set the tone for the
mm-hmm.
day. We set the tone for our family. We can walk in and be pillars of strength, but we also need to have a place to be vulnerable as well. So how
Mm-hmm.
do I nourish that? How do I nourish safety in the home? How do I nourish the environment? So I think that we're being asked of a lot right now, or a lot is being asked of us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And not that we're not always being asked of, in general. But I do think that there's opportunity right
Yeah.
now, a huge, huge opportunity. It's like we've taken the snowball, of our lives and shaken it, not the snowball, but what snow globe,
Snow
right? And like
globe.
shaking it
Yep.
up. It's been shaken up.
Yep.
Even if you're not directly affected, which how can you not be at this point,
Right.
right?
Right.
We all have to wear the mask. We all have to go out if you're choosing to. And even if you're not choosing to, you're still engaging with it. You're either resisting it or you're
Mm,
doing it. You're still in relationship to what's happening. So how can
mm-hmm.
we not be affected? So I think we have to check in. We have
Yeah.
to have our own relationship with what's happening. We have to talk about it. We have to process it somehow. Um,
Well, and I mean, this point because for me, like in the legal work that I do, I try like the equivalent of what you do in, your personal life, spiritual life, business life of stopping people from getting to that really painful spot, right? I can totally relate to that from the standpoint of like the work that I do is also try to prevent people from getting to that really painful spot and putting the prophylactics in place in advance to support their journey rather than cause them to have a big catastrophe. And yet, like, it was really interesting because when I was getting ready even to just do the work myself, and I recognized in a hurry that I needed to do it, but I still wasn't carving out the time to do it because it was like life and my schedule had kind of taken on this momentum of its own. And there was so many pieces of that I felt like I couldn't control or influence even. I look at even my son's schooling and I just felt like we were put out to pasture.
yeah.
And there were hard choices that had to be made about like, does Aiden's schooling come first or does family peace come first, right? And choices that we haven't had to make before. And in talking with girlfriends and this idea of like, okay, if I'm going to start a morning practice, which I've needed to do for a long time, but the reality is there have been times I've been able to do that. COVID, my work schedule shifted so that I was working much later at night, which made it possible for me to get up first thing really early before kids were awake. And yet it's still been hanging out there. And when I talk to other women about it, they'd just be like, I don't even have the time to think about that. It felt like one more thing to layer on.
Yes.
And for
Yes.
me, that was the sign, like it's the thing that you need when you reach the point of like, I don't even have time to think about it. I don't even have time or the capacity to even think about self-care. Like that
Yeah.
is clearly a point where that is the thing that you should be prioritizing.
And I started when my son was really little as well, so I totally understand. I have friends I've had clients actually most recently who have had like a massive challenge of homeschooling and having 5 kids from
Oh,
very little to teenage, and we were able to help her create a practice. And ultimately, if you tell me you don't have the time and I can't think about it, I hear you, but do you hear you? Like, do you hear
Yes.
what you're saying to yourself? Do you hear yourself telling yourself that you don't have 5 minutes, 3 minutes to honor, to check in, to set intention for the day? You can tell me that all you want. It does not take any skin off my knees. Like, I promise you, I will still do my thing. But I'm telling
Mm,
you to wake up to the fact that if you're not able to somehow create a daily anchor of a practice of self-check-in and self-honoring and self-worth, there's something else going on here where you've been saying
mm,
yes to too many things. Something needs to be reevaluated. So, and I'm not like the masculine morning practice at all. I don't care when you wake
mm.
up. I don't care when you do it. I don't care where you do it. I don't care what you're wearing when you do it. I want you to do it because you can do it in bed with your babes around you. You can do it while you're making breakfast for your family. You can put on the music
Mm,
and dance together. You can sit down and give your kids something to draw with and you draw your journal. I can give you a million ways to do it because I have had every resistant type of woman tell me she has no time, and we weave it in, right? We weave it in.
mhm.
I'm not telling you to light 10 candles, close the doors, like dance to 3 songs. I don't care how you do it. If you have 3 minutes, I promise you just to notice when you do that moment, when you even acknowledge the fact that I'm going to figure this out for myself because my energy is worth it. I'm going to be the
Mm,
woman who makes time. Because if you're like, who are you trying to be, right? Are we just trying to like get through the day, or are we actually trying to be intentional about how we want to be moms and
mm,
wives and partners and business owners? Like, do I want to work with a coach who doesn't make time for themselves? Do I want to have someone like, if you're telling me that, okay, so if you're my attorney, but you have a messed up legal life, I'm going to see that, right? So for
right.
me, all I can do as a self-care coach and an inner work coach
Mm,
is do the work. That's all I can do. And I can tell you that there's been days where I didn't do it. Of course, I'm not a perfect human being, but what I have come to see over a decade, 12 years now of doing a morning practice consistently, and even through days of not doing it, I still consider myself doing it because I'm still in relationship with it. Like, I
yeah.
know it's there. I know for a fact that the days that I do check in and make time to get still and write, and whatever combination it's changed over the years, and then what I do has changed over the years, is that I'm more present for my life,
Mm,
and I'm more present for my sadness. I'm more present for my fear. I'm more present for my joy. And here's the misunderstanding. I'm not saying that you do the morning practice and all of a sudden you're a ball of sunshine wherever you go. What I am saying is when you have a practice, you get to be whatever you are. Like, there's days where you
mhm.
wake up and you're pissed off, and something, you saw a headline, you read something, you had an argument, something's unresolved, you have unspokens that have to be yet to be spoken out loud to people, but at least you're acknowledging it. Because the thing that stops us from being fully expressed in general is thinking that we always have to be a certain way, optimistic, on point, on time. Like, we have to be all the things. That's not true, nor can we be all the time. Like, for me, my journey has been learning to express anger and learning to
Mm,
express that truth of that.
yep.
Thank goodness I married who I married, because he's like the Rock. He doesn't care. Like, I don't punch him, but I could if I wanted to. He'd just laugh, like, he lets me be that, because for me,
Yeah.
my life's work up until this point has really been to be expressed,
Yeah.
and not to be like, Elena's always so happy. That was me. That really was.
Yeah.
People wanted me around all the time. They wanted, like, no one wanted to fire me. Like, I was the always happy, resilient, present, constantly happy. My dad died. I'm back to work a week later because I'm me.
Mm,
Like, I just couldn't. I had
yeah.
learned to keep it all in. That's
Yeah.
how my autoimmune issues came up. That's how I learned to do this work. And so I'm not saying that do the self-care, do the practice, and all of a sudden you're going to become the joyful, happy, spiritual light being. I'm saying you're going to be
No.
a real freaking woman with all the
Yes.
emotions, so you can show up to your work, so you can show your children that all emotions are welcome, and that
Mm,
they're welcome at the table, and that you're not scared of that, because it can be scary. If you don't know how to
mhm.
deal with anger or sadness or fear or frustration, of course it can be scary, and not everyone's
Yes.
going to be able to deal with it, but you yourself can come to it. So sometimes my journaling's like really frustrated, and sometimes it's really beautiful and spiritual, but it doesn't matter what it is. It's that I'm there for it, so that I can, because if you can't see all your emotions and experience them, they're going to scare the heck out of you in your children and in your
Yes.
partner and in your close circle. You're not going to know what to do with it because your body's going to contract from it. So it's a lot, it can be a lot, but also I think it's the work we have to do.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't say that a lot, but this is the work we
yes.
have to do.
Yes. And regardless of, hearing you share even about your background and who you were and what you put on and carried for a time, I think the joyful part of this work, even though it comes with sadness and tears and anger, like all the things, right? But the truly joyful part, I think for me, like when I do dig in and do the work, is being able to inhabit parts of myself that had just been closed off or that had just been ignored. It's like that fullness of really being all the parts of yourself. And all of us, I think in some way in childhood, I think it's just a natural occurrence in childhood, are told or we interpret that we do need to cut off parts of ourselves or tamp down parts of ourselves or whatever to just be able to survive or get along or, appease somebody. And the older that we get, I think we have experiences that show us how poorly that serves us in the long run.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to experience and acknowledge. And I think we are in a space in life where a lot of people do have time and space to be, exploring our own spiritual inner selves. And I do recognize that that's not something my mom had time for in her life, or her mom had time for in her life. And so, but the cool thing is, have you ever heard when you heal yourself, you heal, generations forward?
Yes.
But here's an interesting thing that happens is when you do your work, you actually heal generations back. And you can sort of hear that intellectually and say, yeah, I totally get that. But I finally understood how that works. When I do my own work and I understand deeply, deeply, deeply where my stuff comes from, and that I forgive without her needing to apologize at all. I understand with compassion where my mom's stuff came from. And then I look back a generation, I understand with compassion where her mom's stuff came from. I actually rewrite the story.
Yes.
And it ripples back. And then when I tell the story forward, it's not with anger or resentment or even sadness. It is with a deep compassion for my mom and for my grandmother. And I don't even know her grandmother, but I know where they were, and I know their life. And I know that even though I don't know them, I have compassion. And so there's no like story around it anymore. I could just release it, and I can be surrounded with a history of like they did the best they could. Yes. And so am I. And yes. So will my child, and hopefully his children. And so it's a really beautiful thing we can do. And also we become this really, I want a real friend. Like I want to be with friends who have the capacity to be next to me when I'm upset. I'm tired of being the joyful one. Like, screw it. Like, I don't need to be the uplifting one all the time. I am naturally. It's how I've been wired.
Yeah.
But not always. And I want to know, I want to walk away from like a conversation and feel like it's okay that I wasn't the bubbly, joyful, like,
that's right.
I'm not the butterfly all the time, and that's okay. And I do want to more and more have women around me who are just also all of themselves, and not just the parts they think are viewable in public.
Right. No, it's so, you gave me goosebumps with the part about healing generations back. I feel like for a lot of people right now, this is a really relevant conversation because, we've got really interesting dynamics happening. And I think a lot of it also is generational. Like there are certain things that happened in our parents' generation that clearly are unacceptable now. There are certain things that happened in our grandparents' generation that are totally unacceptable now. And I feel like many of us are exhausted by the reality of that, right? And the reality of like wanting to create a future for our children that is a totally new paradigm. And there's a lot of lashback. There's a lot of hanging on to the old paradigm that's happening in certain circles. And my sisters and I, even recently, have been in a very interesting conversation about peeling back the layers, like seeing the truth of who somebody is right now in all the ways that we get to see that on social media and, you know, things that did not exist in generations past. And it's really confronting. It really can be triggering to, you know, some of our belief systems and some of even our understanding of who we thought, for example, our parents were, or who we thought they are. And so this unraveling, and the reason it gave me goosebumps is this part about compassion, right? So at first there has been a lot of anger, even in our family and in our circles, about the reality of who some people are showing up to be in the world, and this disconnect of like loving that person and also having a really hard time with that truth. But then being involved in a conversation, including getting feedback from other people who've known, for example, my mom, who passed away, you know, almost 20 years ago now, and my dad, and like are adding some richness to the stories and some truth that we didn't know as children, right? We're shielded from certain things as we're being parented and being raised. But ultimately, what I can say about it is that arriving to a place where you're able to actually ask the question of like, oh my goodness, what could have led to this being the outcome, or this being the set of beliefs that somebody holds, has ultimately given us a lot more compassion about like how things must have been. Even like I look at my dad from a survival mode as a child, because they were very poor. I literally think he probably spent his entire childhood in survival. So he really views the world, in my perspective, it appears that he views the world in a dog eat dog kind of way, which is totally discordant with how my sisters and I like want things to be. So it's been a struggle to like see his perspective and try to have compassion for that. But through this process of conversation and talking to other people about the realities of his life as a child, the reality even of some parts of my mom's life and her dying young, like it's it's so freeing to be able to reach a point of letting go of the anger, which is the initial trigger, and do the work and ask the questions of like, how do I get to a point of really understanding this human being as a person, to be able to reach the point of compassion and release the relationship from that anger and from that really kind of feeling trapped in a way of not understanding it, not fully knowing, like, how did we arrive to this point where I came from this family or this particular parent and I see things so differently,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And I think a lot of that lives, like you said, for some people. I think for all people, our family's history lives in our cellular
Yes.
level, in our bones, it's in our blood, and
Yes.
we carry that. And so we've had these conversations in our family, of course, I think like all families have, and this real compassion and openness to the fact that, there are some people who are like, well, it's not happening now, so why can't you just let it go? Why can't you just
Yeah.
like be grateful for what you have? And I think gratitude and grief can live together. And I
Yes.
think that the anger comes from a very, very cellular, deep level. And even though it's not happening right now, I think it's still very much alive for people who've experienced it in their families. Um, whether it's racism or wealth inequality or whatever it is. And we all have it.
Mm.
My family came not from the US, we came from a different country. We have a whole different layer of like our family
Yes.
history and trauma that my family experienced in a different country. And so there's a deep compassion, even though I did not live here generationally. I grew up here. Of course, it's part of my story, it's part of my
Hmm.
child's story. And I think at a very deep level, I think we do live in a time where we have so much choice and freedom and
Mm.
possibility, that is also true. The sadness that I have that I think a lot of people have as well is that it feels like because people are so shut down or scared or unwilling to look or unwilling to go deeper even within themselves, that so many conversations get shut down, and that the easy thing to do for a lot of people is to go with the mass sort of collective consciousness right now. And I don't know that that's serving. I don't think anyone knows that it's serving. And I think we can all agree that it's being engineered at some level, so that the truth of even what we need to work on is being totally diverted from what we actually need to be talking about, right? Like, it's no longer we're having a new conversation about racism. It's no longer we're having a conversation about the healthcare system. It's none of those things, because we're being so, like, my question is always like, who benefits from this? Who's benefiting from this? Truly, are we benefiting from what's going on? Are our brothers and sisters around the country benefiting? Are colored people, Black people benefiting? Are white people benefiting? Who's benefiting? Like, really, who's benefiting? Is the Democrat benefiting? Is the Republican benefiting? Like, so it's a really uncomfortable conversation. And if you have to get uncomfortable to have a conversation, get uncomfortable, because it's like, I don't want to go on this whole tangent, that's not where we started. But I think but if I can tie it together, is the willingness to be uncomfortable in your own emotions is actually part of it, right? If I'm uncomfortable with my own anger, with my own grief, with my own discomfort, then of course I can't even have a difficult conversation with anyone else without feeling like my body's shutting down. Like, I have been in a place in my life where I couldn't speak my truth, my real truth, like my angry truth, without feeling shaky, without my body feeling like this is like, I gotta go. I can sit right now and have those difficult conversations within my family. It's very tricky because a lot of people aren't willing to have the in-depth conversation. It's very much like, as soon as you trigger them, they're gone, or they're yelling, or they're like, so it's interesting. It's an interesting time. And I think it is important to have good conversations and be honest with yourself. And you can only really do that when you really take time to even know what you think about it. Instead of just hopping on the whatever label train you want to hop on, that's more comfortable.
Well, and I think, there's a powerful point to be made, which is that you're right. Not everybody, like, when I even think about the conversations in my own family, and I think a lot of families are experiencing this right now, a lot of intense dynamics over what's happening and different ways of viewing it, is I agree. Like, we're actually not able to have those conversations at this point, and there have been like some roadblocks put up because they've gone so poorly. And yet I feel like what is important is that people do still stay in conversation with themselves and still explore, like, how can you reach a point of compassion and understanding of the other person's journey? It's really tremendously difficult to do at times. Like, I'm not making any bones about that part. And yet there have been even some recent breakthroughs for us where I'm like, oh, I have reached a new point of understanding about what has led to where we are right now, even within my own family, that gives me a lot more compassion for stories that I didn't know existed, realities and truths that were there that I didn't know existed, right? And I think that there is a way for us to stay in conversation with ourselves, even if that conversation can't be had with another person for whatever reason, that will still lead us to that greater understanding, and still release that anger and release that tension in the context of how we relate to somebody. Because I think that's palpable, even for them, even without the conversation. I think that's palpable. And I think it serves all of us to do that work so that we can release ourselves and others. And I love what you so beautifully put about grief and gratitude can coexist. And this is the beautiful complexity of life, is that accepting, like, we have these parts of ourselves, of our own family, that are hard to embrace and hard to love. And at the same time, we can be tremendously grateful for the gifts that we do have from that relationship, from those learnings, from our childhood, you know, even the hard parts, right? And I think that is just really fundamentally one of the most beautiful truths of life and the benefit of doing the work.
And the really cool, yes, absolutely. The benefit of doing the work is really being able to have the better conversations. And I just want to add something that, with a little grace and compassion for everyone else who's like, I don't know, this sounds really hard. You can actually do the inner work with somebody without them there.
Yes.
Right. So take the example for the fact that my father died also a long time ago when I was in my early 20s, and it's really unexpected. And there was a lot of conversations that didn't happen, and he wasn't there for a lot of things, like, you know, my wedding and my son being born and all the milestones. And so there's a lot of resentment built up and a lot of, you know, questions unanswered from things that I wanted to experience. And everyone has lost someone who, you know, a lot earlier than I have, and some, like, you know, whatever. This isn't like about me, boohoo, he died. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I was still able to do work around tension or around regrets or around anger that I had about things that had happened in life. And without him being there, you know, I was able to have those conversations. And also for all of you out there who have someone in your life who you maybe can't have the difficult conversations with, because honestly, truly, they are not willing to go there. And it just keeps getting stuck in a loop, right?
Yes.
I can still do that work with the person in my life who's not willing to go there, because the work ultimately is not on them.
That's right.
The work is still on me to
right.
understand what is upsetting me. And trigger the word, you know, sometimes I use it, sometimes I hate it. More than anything, the real honest word is you're getting upset by something. Something's upsetting you. Something that you think they're thinking, you're assuming they're feeling. You can have the entire conversation in your head without them being there, right? Because you know them so well, right? Because we just know the other person so well. Like we know the right thing. So we must take a step back and say, if you want to have that conversation in your head, have it. Be honest with yourself about how many assumptions are being made about their reaction, which probably are true to some extent, based in reality of trying to have other conversations. But really, if you can, like, there's so many great exercises that we do in our virtual retreats and in our live calls, journaling exercises where you can actually have the conversation. One of my favorite ways to have a conversation with someone who's not there is when I'm driving. I haven't done it in a while because I think I've worked through a lot with the people that are closest to me. I would have conversations with my mom. Like if I knew something, I'm working through something or a memory or like just something that I'm dealing with, I would just start driving on my own. I'd be like, all right, Mom, let me tell you. I would just do that. It feels really silly at first, but after you do it, now drive safely, of course. You could do it in your bathtub, whatever. Like you could do it wherever. I like driving and thinking, and like I get really inspired when I'm moving forward in space. But I've had really good conversations with my mom without her being there, because it helps me to get to the depth of what I'm actually feeling. Anger is usually like the masking, like the frosting on the cake. Yep. But what's actually in the middle, underneath all these little, like the cake, right? But in the middle of the cake, there's this juicy middle that's actually sadness. Right. And it's for the number of retreats I've hosted, for the number of, the years of work I've done with other amazing women who are like experts in helping people navigate their emotions. I've seen it over and over and over again. Yes, you're angry, but if you can move that anger through movement, through physical, like release, underneath it is always this real, like 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old sadness that has gone unloved, that has gone unexpressed. And when that comes up, it's just like an entire physical release where you're left with a really innocent, pure, and it's not a one and done. Like it's an over and over thing. But at the core, when you're in that moment, you're like, I'm human, you're human. Wow. Like you can really get to a deep, deep sense of what is real versus the layers and layers and layers of story that we have built up for protection, for our own protection. It is how we human beings are wired. It's a shared human experience, right? I'm not saying anything that you haven't experienced, right? So I think that inner work and the self-care is a gift to yourself in much deeper ways than
Mm.
just like, oh, I feel so relaxed now.
Yeah,
It's
right.
great to feel relaxed. It's great to take a beautiful bath and release the energy. It's great to do your nails and feel luxurious and worthy of the goodies. But on a much deeper level, it's actually helping you as a human being to
Mm-hmm.
connect with other human beings in authentic, real, compassionate, which I think we've both said several times now,
Yeah.
way, because but then you get to think like, oh, if I'm having this complex experience, maybe they're having a complex experience too. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the tools. Maybe they're not in a place of self-awareness in the moment. And you can and not from a place of I'm better than at all. It's just what you were ready to go through. And we're
Mm-hmm.
all on our own, explorational path. I could look at myself and I thought I knew so much at 25 and 35. I was so smart. I was so like wise, and I was to that extent of who I was then.
Yeah.
And there was so much humility in everything I've experienced since then. And I'm sure I will be humbled many times over in the future. So that's the real inner work of self-care, the energetic self-care, the physical self-care, the spiritual self-care. That's what I love to teach and to share and to live. So
Well, and it serves us in multiple ways, right? Doing that work, even when people think, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, it feels like work on top of work. The reality is that, even in a couple days of like getting up and waking up, even though it's tough to do, like doing this group work that I'm doing right now at 6 a.m., it really feels like a gift. It feels almost like a little bit like this magical thing that I'm giving to myself that, you know, it shouldn't feel that way. In my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the work that I need to be doing. This is the common thread that I should be weaving throughout every day, not just crisis periods, not just periods that are super intense. And I say crisis periods, I mean that in the bigger sense of, kind of where we are in the world right now. I'm very lucky to be blessed and have a healthy family and have work that I can do. And so I'm not saying that we're in personal crisis, but it still has definitely been a period of compression. And yet the deeper work that you're talking about, like, serves us through times like that and on a much bigger and longer time frame, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Like, just our perspective, I think everything shifts. And so I'm such a fan of what you do. I have often longed to be better at this particular aspect in my own life, even though I'm aware of it. Like, I even like your reflection around, even on the days that I don't do the work, like, I'm aware of the work and I'm aware, you know what I mean? And I think it's really important to stay in that place of being aware and watching for ways to incorporate it into our daily life. And
Yeah.
I really love, just as a final point, I really love your share around how flexible it can be to actually create that. It doesn't have to be, because I think we put all of these shoulds on ourselves about it should look this way. And the way that I've read about other people doing it, like I should have an hour to sit down and have total silence and do all the deep thinking, it doesn't necessarily have to look that way. And that feels
No.
so freeing to hear you say that in all the ways that you've helped women incorporate this into their
Yeah.
lives.
And I'd love to add just two more quick points that I think
Yeah.
are really important to understand. I'm not telling you to do more work. And I actually am trying to consciously remove that word from the way I explain it. It's more like inner play, inner exploration, because I'm not
Mm-hmm.
telling you to do more work. God knows we have enough work on our plate, right, with all the things we're doing. And the other thing that I want to just point out is that anytime you're trying to change or add or something to your day, you're going to be coming up against your subconscious patterns, and that's a really powerful force. So when I tell someone to experience the magic morning practice, or have all
Mm-hmm.
these different tools that I can offer up in terms of how to do it, the tools are great, but your subconscious patterns are a force to be reckoned with. So when I say give yourself grace, really, really, really give yourself grace. If you're trying to say like, oh, I really think I want to try this morning thing and see what happens, really just be playful with it.
Mm-hmm.
understand that your inner resistance is going to be really great, like big, because our mind loves comfort and loves patterns and loves the predictability of how you do things. So I'll tell you, a key to this is understanding that you already have a morning practice. Regardless of what you're doing, there's a certain way you wake up, there's a certain way you brush your
Mm-hmm.
teeth, there's a certain way, there's a pattern to the things you do in the morning because of years of habit. So when you're trying to embed a new thing, your entire like inner, structure is going to be like, no, I'm not doing this. I don't have time to do this. So just, if you need ideas, I have a million ideas. The magic morning practice, I literally just about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, I created a whole new workbook with lots of really cool prompts. I created 4 different mood lists that are
Mm-hmm.
playlists with music, and I use them and I love them. That like if you're feeling, they're called stomp, activate, grace, and sensual. So some mornings I'm like, I gotta stomp today. Some mornings I'm like, ooh, it's time for some sensual. So you can really just be intuitive within the practice as well. But I give you all the tools to make it as playful as possible, as
Mm.
tiny as possible, so that you can just kind of like open that door, see inside. If you like it and it makes the rest of your day go a little bit more smoothly, you'll want to try it again. I'm not giving you 28 things to do. Like if you have 3 minutes, I promise you can do it. So that's how I try to just sit on your shoulder a little bit and just help you, because I want you to feel good. I want you to be
Yeah.
authentic, and I'm not invested in it. Like, do it or don't do it. But if you do it, it's going to be fun.
Well, and I love even the way that you presented and the playfulness. And I think we can get overly attached to like the rigor and the schedule and the structure because I think we hear so often. Not sure what that. I'm getting like interference, like a little bit of sound interference, but David can hopefully edit that out. I think we can get too attached to the structure and feeling like if we don't do things a certain way, then we just don't have the capacity to do them. And so
Mm-hmm.
what feels really playful about that, and for anybody listening, we're going to be sharing her link in the show notes to the Magic Morning Habit, which includes a printable workbook, the custom playlist that she just described. I mean, it sounds amazing. And what a lovely invitation, even to start small. The 3 minutes, like who doesn't have 3 minutes to just test it out, right? See where it
Absolutely.
goes.
Yay.
Yay. So where else do you like to connect, Elena? We'll share that link. Any others that you want me to share as far as social media, but tell us for a minute where you'd
Yeah,
like to
Instagram
connect.
is the best place. Everything that's current is updated there, and it's Elena_Lipson.
Okay.
There is another Elena Lipson, and it's really strange because she lives on the East Coast. She's also a women's empowerment coach. She has similar like dark hair, dark
Oh my
eyes.
gosh.
She has a podcast called
Oh,
Rise Up. And so I've gotten emails about her like to be guest on her podcast. I'm like, that's not me.
hilarious.
So it's kind of a
Hilarious.
weird doppelganger thing, even though we don't look really alike, but we have these
Yes.
really similar backgrounds and our names are spelled the same. So Elena_Lipson.
Score Lipson. Oh my gosh, that's a funny
I
story.
know. I know.
Yay, all the wonderful Elenas in the world. Um, so before we sign off, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I just feel like you have a slice of magic that everybody needs.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. What do you want to leave our listeners with? Either an idea, a thought, an action item? How do you want to sign off?
I think a big reminder that you get to design your life and that
Mm,
you are worthy of not doing it alone. So, even just spending this time with you, Heather, it's like, I know for me, I'm craving togetherness and
yes.
gathering. And I miss feeding my friends and I
I
miss like meeting at
know.
restaurants. It sounds so petty, but it's like my soul
Mm,
is just craving it. Which is why I actually love that I have the membership for 7 years now, 6 years now, that, I do have a place where I can go and connect with these amazing women. But
mm,
part of the reason I teach what I teach is because I feel like the more we can center ourselves, the more we can joyfully connect with others.
yes.
And we are all worthy of not having to do it alone. And even if it's Zoom, like find some support, for yourself. It's really about supporting
Yes.
yourself and being worthy of being and living and doing life on your own terms.
Well, and I love the reminder that it is a choice. We get to choose. We get to like define it and design it our own way. And I think it's easy to forget that we have a choice in the matter.
Define and design. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good tag somewhere.
You can have it. I don't know.
Thanks.
Those words just came to mind when I was reflecting what you had said. Well, Elena, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for sharing your gift. Again, people can check it out at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Check out Elena's episodes for all of, or her episode for all of the amazing links and a link to her magic morning habit. Elena, I so appreciate you.
Thank
I do
you.
wish we lived closer. I would totally love to go steal a coffee with you, maybe someday in the relatively not too distant future.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank
Thank you.
you.